morning, everybody. We have been so busy. We are in the middle of canning season. Our tomatoes are coming on. We're still canning green beans. So you can see behind me, I've got a pressure canner and a water bath canner. We've got some jars of salsa that I canned last night and got 14 pints done. I have actually the same amount to do again. We had so many tomatoes ready. So this morning I'm going to be getting everything ready to can the rest of our salsa. And then I actually have green beans that is ready to be pressure canned. So we are going to have a very busy day today. This is my number one tip for a busy canning day. Have supper ready before you start canning. It never fails. I will spend the entire day picking the garden, canning, making all of this amazing food to put up, and then I wind up eating like a frozen pizza for supper or something. So, my number one tip for canning day is have supper ready. The crock pot is your best friend. So, this is our favorite salsa recipe. I've been making it for 3 or 4 years now, and it's just our absolute favorite. Now this recipe I got from Melissa K. Norris. So if you want her exact recipe, I will send you over her way. It takes a couple onions, bell peppers, and jalapenos, garlic, tomatoes. I think the one thing that makes this such a good recipe is it uses lime juice. It is delicious. Now I will say with her recipe, it calls for cilantro, and I honestly just don't really care for cilantro, so I leave that part out. This is such a great recipe. You guys should check that out and try it for yourself. I am going to start cutting all that up. You can hear over here, I've got our jars in the dishwasher, so they are going to be clean and hot. And then I've got my canner and my salsa pot over on the stove. Here we've got our tomatoes peeled and sliced and ready to go. I have also drained the juice off of them before I do anything else with them. I drain all the juice that I can. This will help make a thicker salsa, and then I'm actually going to can this juice on its own. So I'm already one step ahead, having this juice to can and not messing with cooking my tomatoes down forever trying to get it to thicken up. So there's a little tip for you when you're making salsa. I've got all the ingredients for our salsa in the pot heating up. I've got my canner ready. I've got the water in it warming up. I've got my jars in the dishwasher. They just finished, so they're sitting in there staying warm. Okay. The salsa has cooked down. It is ready to be put in jars into the canner. I've got the water for my water bath canner warm, ready to put the hot jars into. The salsa is boiling and hot, ready to go into my hot jars. At the back of the stove, I have my lids keeping warm. And then I have all of my rings, my headspace tool, a measuring cup, a funnel, everything is ready to go. I have a couple clean rags that I'm going to use to wipe the rim of the jar before I put the lids on. And I am ready to get this salsa into the jar. fill any more jars, I'm going to let the air bubbles out and check the headspace on the ones that I have to make sure that I have enough salsa to fill the jars that I've started. There's maybe a jar or half a jar left, so I just want to make sure these are full before I do any more. I'll just let air bubbles out. When you can salsa, you want a 1/2 inch headspace, and I can tell by looking that this one is not a 1/2 inch. I'm gonna add a little more salsa to the jar. I will try to let any air bubbles out again. Then I'm gonna use my headspace tool to see where I'm at. That's good. To have the accurate amount of headspace, so I can eyeball it pretty well when I'm filling the jars, but I always go back through and double check with this little ruler that I use. Okay, that was not enough to fill this last jar, so we'll let it cool, put it in the fridge, and we'll be able to eat it without canning it. The next thing I'm gonna do is use a clean rag, and I am just going to wipe the rim of the jar off to make sure there's no salsa or food or anything like that where the lid is gonna go that might affect the way that it seals. See, like there was a pepper seed on it. Definitely don't want anything in the way of a good seal on your jars. You do want to move fairly quickly, but this salsa and these jars are hot enough that it's not a big deal for them to sit for a few minutes while I'm cleaning them up. It's more important to make sure that your jar is clean and get a good seal, because these are boiling hot and they will be okay for a minute. The next thing I'm going to do with my lid lifter tool, it's just a little magnet. I'm going to lift my lids out of that water. It is hot. Turn them off, set them, then I just set the lid on the jar, and I have got my rings clean also. Then I just screw them on finger tight. I don't want to over tighten them. And I will just do this for each jar. Now I know anymore they say that you don't have to heat your lids before you put them on, but I can feel a difference if I just set a cool lid on the jar. The rubber gasket doesn't feel as grippy. So I've noticed that whenever I do heat them up, this rubber seal around there, it gets nice and warm and just feels like it's gonna be more secure on the jar. So I do like to go ahead and heat my lids up. Once I have all of the rings on my jars, I'm going to start moving them into the canner The water is already warm but not boiling. I have all my jars loaded in the canner. Now this is actually a pressure canner, but I am using it like a water bath canner today. I am not gonna put the weighted gauge on. I'm just gonna set the lid on like that. And then it's going to act just like my water bath canner would. And I'm gonna turn the heat up, and I wanna bring this water up to a boil. Then whenever the water is boiling, I'm gonna process it for 15 minutes for pints. These are the jars of salsa that I canned yesterday, and they are cool and they've been sitting. I moved them over away from the stove where I was canning the next batch. So now I need to take the rings off, because you do not store your jars with the rings on. So I'll take all of the rings off. They should come off fairly easily. Sometimes they do stick a bit. And then I will check each jar to make sure that it's sealed. I just gently kind of pull against the lid to make sure that it doesn't come off with just like a gentle tug. I'm not doing anything crazy because I don't want to hurt the seal. And make sure that the bump is down in the center of all of them. The next thing I'll do is just take a clean rag and just wipe them up and make sure that, you know, if there's any salsa that maybe siphoned out and ran down the side, I'll just clean these all up, label them. It's very important. Label and date so you know what you're working with. When I'm finished with that, I'm going to start snapping beans so that I can can green beans after my salsa is finished. I got all of my green beans snapped. There are my ends. I use the same bowl every time I do green beans. So I can pretty well judge just by looking that this is going to be about 6 quarts of green beans. I might get 7, but I don't think there's quite enough there. But 6 quarts is a pressure canner full of green beans. So I am going to get my jars cleaned up and get them heated up. I'm going to get these rinsed and get all of my stuff ready to get my green beans in the canner.